Hello, Booktube. I've got another tag for you today on a gray, wet Saturday. But this is not, I did an original tag earlier today, but this is not that. This is a perennial tag, something that everybody does once a year. It's kind of a checkup. It's the Mid-Year Bookish Freakout Tag. And I've been doing this for years. I think I've been doing this every year that I've been on Booktube. Where you look over, you get to the month of June and you look over your year of reading so far and you look forward. With a standard batch of questions. I thought we'd go through those this year and see how we stand. I'll admit up front, as a little bit of a spoiler, that 2023 has not been all that great a year for reading new releases. Those of you who are new to my channel, and thankfully that's nobody, this channel is hemorrhaging viewers. We are rapidly approaching 14K and then on to 13K. But just in case newcomers have wandered in, I am a book critic. And the parameters that I've set for my reading, we all do it, but the parameters that I've set for my reading are mostly, probably 90%, the new releases in the American book market in the 15 or 16 genres that interest me. Not the top releases in those genres, but the new releases in those genres. It's an impossible goal. I want to cover the waterfront. I want to cover those new releases. And it's not possible to do. Even if you pare away as much as possible, we're still talking about 100,000 books, which I can't do in 1 year. I console myself by saying that I do a lot. I cover a lot of those new releases. And it's also a small consolation for me to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I cover more of those new releases than do not only other book critics, but a whole other book departments in newspapers and magazines. So it's at least something. I'm nowhere near the total goal, but I cover a lot, and that means that by June, I have a pretty good EKG reading of what the publishing world has been like so far in that year, and it hasn't been all that thrilling. I know that's not diagnostic because the publishing industry in America is set up freighted for the second half of the year. It's freighted for autumn, especially. So a lot of the publishers' really big offerings I might not have seen yet. But just as a forewarning, you're not going to see much in the way of giddy squealing in this video. But we start off with number one. I've got the data pad here with a ton of pictures to show you. So question number one is the best book that you have read so far. And for me, this isn't new in any way, but it's this. It's the Soviet century. Big fat thing that's all about the Soviet Union, this country, this empire that existed, that was born, lived, dominated the whole world, threatened the whole world, and then died, all in the lifespan of a single human being. And I kind of thought this would be, at first I kind of thought that this would be a straightforward history of the Soviet Union. There have been a couple, there are a couple in the works, but this is much more than that. This is far more impressionistic, almost novelistic. This is yet another example of a big fat work of nonfiction that manages to pull in all of the most convincing narrative techniques of a big fat work of fiction. So I loved it. Not a whole lot has come close to this in terms of favorites. Then question number two is the best sequel that you have read so far. This is not a very contested field, but for me it would be this. It would be Sea Castle by Andrew Mayne. This is an underwater investigations unit thriller about exactly what the title of the series sounds like. A group of people, especially one particular character, our main character, who perform underwater rescues, search and seizure, that sort of thing. All sorts of insider insights into that world. So fascinating in their own right. It's the best sequel that I've read so far, but that's not to say that it's all that good a sequel. It's just the best one that I've read so far. It's that odd entry in any ongoing series. I think Andrew Mayne probably knows from reader response and critical response that he has a winner of a series on his hands with this. And if you're a writer, you are familiar with poverty. You are familiar with uncertainty. If you get a winner series, you're going to want to stick to it. And even if you don't want to stick to it, you're still going to stick to it. And that tends to produce in books in series that one odd book where the author is kicking against the traces. And I think this is that book. It doesn't read much like an Underwater Investigations Unit novel, even though it has a lot of the same characters, a lot of the same preoccupations. It's that one odd book in a series. If you've read, books in series, thrillers or mysteries or even science fiction, you probably know that one book. This is that one book. I like the way this author writes, so I didn't really care. I just wanted to note that just in case you're following this whole series and haven't got to this one. But that would be my favorite sequel. Then question number 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. Question number 4 is most anticipated release of the second half of the year. And question number 15 is what books do you really need to read by the end of the year? And for me, those things are the same. Those 3 questions are pretty much the same. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to eagerly expect. I don't know what's going to be good and bad. The things that are coming up, in the future for the next 6 months of the year, some of them I recognize enough about them to anticipate them, but I don't know if they'll be any good. So what I typically tend to do with this tag is take those 3 questions and sort of ball them together into a look at upcoming releases that I haven't got to yet that intrigue me. So I thought we'd do that. Starting with, let's see here, this one here, Chris Van Tulleken. This is Ultra Processed People, about, well, it's about ultra processed food, but also all sorts of other things too. This is about I imagine this will be about gigantic and scary advances in the biomedical market. So synthetic meat, all of the synthetic steroids and hormones and whatnot that's pumped into the actual tortured and executed meat that you eat every day. What is in that stuff that you have no idea about? How is it affecting you? And where are you imbibing other artificial things? Microplastic globules, microscopic plastic globules that are everywhere. They're in everything that you eat and breathe and everything that you do. I don't know if that's the gist that this will take, but that's on my list. Also, this thing here, this is by Daniel Kraus. One person that I know who's connected with the manufacturing of this book emailed me and said, "Is it time for Meg to be dethroned?" I don't think that's possible, but this is called Whale Fall. And it is a novel, forthcoming novel, about a guy he's scuba diving and he finds himself tangling with a giant squid, which is not a healthy thing to do anyway. Giant squids are mighty strong, and some of them can be pretty aggressive. But it gets all the worse because in addition to being mighty strong and really aggressive, giant squid are also the favorite prey item of sperm whales. While this guy is tangling with this giant shrimp, this giant squid, he gets eaten by a sperm whale. He gets swallowed whole by a sperm whale. And finds himself inside the sperm whale's stomachs. The sperm whales have many stomachs. And he is inside these stomachs. He's got just enough air in his tank to last for an hour. So he's got to find a way to get out of the belly of this whale in that time. Now, I admit, on the surface, that is pretty ridiculous. Almost as ridiculous as Meg by Steve Alten. Almost. They share one thing in common. Those of you who know the ending of the novel Meg will know what I mean. But they share also the fact that they are insanely silly. The premise is insanely silly. Sperm whales don't swallow their food whole. That's why they have all those teeth. And also, it's not like when you get swallowed by something, whether it's a sperm whale or a human or whatever, it's not like when you get swallowed by something whole, that if they don't bite you on the way down, well, then you just need to find a way to get back out. There are biochemical processes involved. There are stomach acids involved. Your deadline would not be how much air you have left in your scuba tank, for Pete's sake. But nevertheless, I'm gonna read this. I'm really gonna enjoy it, and we'll see. We'll see if it dethrones Meg. I doubt that it will. Then we have, this is by Dan Sinykin. This is something I've already read, but I'll give it another read when I get the finished copy. This is Big Fiction, which is his book about the gradual swallowing of the fiction world by conglomerate publishing houses that then swallow each other. So if you are a big fan of so-called contemporary literary fiction, and you're reading the slim works of autofiction that are all about transcribing the author's Twitter feed, and you're reading the longer works of autofiction that are all about transcribing the author's Twitter feed, you might not know, because they all have different publishing labels on them, you might not know how many of those things are owned or distributed by a German company named Bertelsmann. It was my experience in bookstores that no one had ever heard that name, even though it was responsible for keeping the lights on in the bookstore. And this is going to be a chronicle of all of that, of the big businessification of publishing. I don't know what kind of a critical response it's going to get. I found it, on my first read-through, a little dutiful. When this is an exciting story, and it affects, 90% of readers read fiction. Of those 90% of readers, probably 60% read contemporary fiction. So this affects readers. This affects a lot of readers. These stories do. I guess maybe there was a book a couple of years ago called Inside the Critic Circle, which was all about book reviewing. And I was getting that same feeling from reading this. When I read Inside the Critic Circle, I was thinking, when I started, I was thinking, well, if this ever was a home run of a book for Steve, it's this. And it was flat. It was dutiful and dead. It trudged along. And I felt the same thing here. So we will see. We'll see what a reread does. But you might want to put it on your list. Then we have, this is by Greg Skomal. This is Chasing Shadows, a book about tagging great white sharks, charting them, tracing them, finding out where they go, how many of them there are, what they do all day, aside from kill people. I have a fascination with this subject. I read every great white shark book that comes out. I read pretty much every shark book that comes out. I'm on the perfect fence sitter on this subject because I've spent a lot of time on Earth's oceans, and there's nothing cuddly or misunderstood about sharks. Tiger sharks, bull sharks, but especially great white sharks. This is why, you wouldn't catch me dead swimming in the ocean. I watch YouTube videos of people in shark-infested waters. The water, sure, it's bright and clean and turquoise, and they just dive off the deck. Oh, isn't this great? Boat life, tropic life, I'm thinking, this is exactly what the beginning of this video would look like if it then goes dark and horrible because a shadow surfaces in the water and starts eating you. This is exactly what it would look like. And people will watch that video. You might watch that video and say, well, what were you thinking? But you're doing it. But anyway, so on the one hand, I don't have much in the way of cuddly sympathy for these beings, but on the other hand, they're doomed. They're on the edge of extinction. So I want to read about them. I want to read about the people who are going out and looking for them. So I put this on my list. It's not the last time you're going to see a great white shark on this list. This next one is Daniel Silva. I've already read this, so I want to give it another go. This is The Collector. And this is about, it stars his effete, super sophisticated, omnicompetent art restorer main character. But here he's dealing with art theft, specifically with for a large part of this book, with the Gardner Museum. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum here in Boston had a famous art theft in 1990. Thieves went through the building overnight and stole a large amount of things, including 2 or 3 absolutely priceless paintings that no one is ever going to see again with their own eyes. But in this book, the author concocts a whole story around the Vermeer that was stolen. And I always think that I should like Daniel Silva more than I do. I mean, he's doing everything that a thriller writer should do to make me like him, and yet I don't. And with this book, I had high hopes. I thought, all right, well, you're right in my backyard here. I know this subject really, really well. Maybe this will do it, and it didn't. I'm going to give it another try. I don't think this book is out yet, so I'm going to give it another try. Same thing with this next author, Adrian McKinty. I think I've read some books of his that I thought were really good, and then he seems to have gotten worse. A couple of his latest books have just not been good at all. And this is his new one, The Detective Up Late. And I'm always going to give him a try. I read Dead as Dead May Be. Dead I Well May Be is the name of the book. Dead I Well May Be. And I loved it. Thought it was fantastic. And a few of the books after that I've liked. Really liked. So I'm going to keep reading him for the rest of his career. And maybe there'll be troughs. Maybe this is not just a downturn, but a trough. I'll give it a try. And this next one, I have had it on my docket to read, and I put it off, and put it off, and put it off. I may DNF it. It strikes me as the kind of book that I would DNF. This is Unafraid, Just Getting Started by Carrie Lake. And that's the picture that she put on the cover. because I want to stress this, Carrie Lake is not a troll. She's not a grifter. She's not a Trumpist who's looking to buy in to the dumbest, most gullible demographic in the United States. She's crazy. She's actually insane. And if you've been around actual insane people, sometimes you wouldn't know. You would have to find the one, well, a friend of mine used to call it the fissure. You'll be talking to them just fine, but if you stumble into a fissure, that crack will show you that they're insane. And you'll never know otherwise. Carrie Lake thinks that she is governor of Arizona. And that is exactly the same as thinking that she's Napoleon Bonaparte. And that's the look that you have if you consider yourself to be not only a key figure in the march of destiny, but the key figure. More than Abraham Lincoln, more than George Washington, more than Jesus Christ. If you, in your mind, are the most important figure in the history of the world, that's what you'll look like when you shoot your cover photo. And I know this book is going to be about that. It's going to be about how I'm governor of Arizona. They cheated me out of my job. And everyone who's ever tested otherwise, all of the mechanics, all of the diagnostics from the computers, everything. It's all of it. All of it is wrong. I'm right. I'm governor of Arizona. I want you to call me governor. I'm going to act like I'm governor. And I'm going to turn down an offer to be Donald Trump's running mate because I'm not allowed to be his running mate if I'm governor of Arizona, et cetera, et cetera. This is a book by a crazy person. It wasn't written by her, but it was approved by her. And I know that I'm going to get that. I know what that's going to. This is going to be full-on delusion. So I've been putting it off. I shouldn't. I don't think this thoroughly nefarious, insane person is done with American politics. So if I could be 100% sure that she was just a noxious footnote, then I might just comfortably ignore this thing. And even though I'm not going to ignore it, I might DNF it. Then there's this next one. This is to get away from the crazy. This is a new novel. This is The Librarianist by Patrick DeWitt, the author of The Sisters Brothers, and The Family Fang. And we'll see. We'll see. This author doesn't always please me, but we'll see. I've got one of those wrong. Off the top of my head right now, looking at this list, I'm trying to remember what was his breakout book. It was The Sisters Brothers, right? Not The Family Fang. But either way, he's on my radar. He is a known name. He is exactly the kind of thing that I get when I cover the 15 or 16 genres that genuinely interest me. It doesn't have to be that I love. I don't have to project that I'm going to love it. I just have to say, this is the genre that genuinely interests me, so I'm going to read the new releases. Political stuff in America. Carrie Lake falls under that heading. Contemporary fiction. Patrick DeWitt falls under that heading. I might not be all that enthused, but we will see. Same thing with this next one. This next one is a certified bad actor. He is his name is Dan Ariely. He did a book called Predictably Irrational that I savaged at great length when it came out. And this is his new book, Misbelief: What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. And if you look at this guy's career, and especially his publishing history, you will read that subtitle, What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things, and you will scream at the top of your lungs, you do. You've built an entire career doing exactly that. You do. You're the answer to the question that you're asking. You make rational people believe irrational things by slinging bullcrap at them 24 hours a day until your back gives out. Nevertheless, I'm still going to read it because it's a new release. But not all new releases are punishments. Some are guaranteed pleasure, like this. Vivian Chen, this is her new book, Misfortune Cookie. Where the fortune in the cookie is, of course, a skull and crossbones. This is a whole series of cozy murder mysteries. I've loved every one that's been in this series. I think they're absolutely great. Wonderful characters that you want to revisit. And classic cozy mystery feel to it. Where the location is everything, the quirks of the characters are everything. And the fact that, yeah, somebody was brutally murdered, sure, that's in there. But you're not supposed to lose any sleep over it or anything. I'm looking forward to Misfortune Cookie. How could I not be? And this next one, Once Upon a Time. If you'd shown me this in a forthcoming list for years, if you'd shown me this in a forthcoming list, I'd said, well, I'll read it. Don't ask me to be excited about it. It's going to be a turgid nightmare. But the last few years have changed my read on this author. This could very much be a surprisingly enjoyable book. This is Murtaugh by Christopher Paolini, the new book in the Inheritance cycle. But in the meantime, Christopher Paolini has written 2 really good science fiction novels that aren't full of YA gesturing and don't forget to be awesome dumbness. They're both really, really good. So who knows what this will be like? Who knows? I have no idea. I don't think that Christopher Paolini now could recapture the stupid verbosity of the Inheritance cycle. I don't think he could. I think he's changed as an author. I think he's grown as an author. So will this be him trying to do that, or will this be him revisiting the fantasy world that made him a millionaire? Only in a different way. If it's the second one, it'll be unprecedented in fantasy writing because, for instance, you get someone like Fritz Leiber or Michael Moorcock that revisit fantasy lands that they wrote decades earlier, but they were never bad writers. They might be better writers, but they were never bad writers. Those early books weren't laughable. And the Inheritance cycle was pretty bad. But Christopher Paolini is not a bad writer anymore. He's, in fact, a very good writer now. So this could be really fascinating. It could be that I'll just be bored by it, but it could be really fascinating. Then this next one, well, like I said, I have bailiwicks. I read the new releases in the 15 or 16 genres that interest me. Some of them I read more than others. Some of them I read as many as I can. Pretty much all the new releases in that bailiwick. And the genre that does that more than any other is biography. It's my favorite kind of writing. I tend to read a lot of biographies in any year. The minor releases from the academic presses, but also the major releases. And when it comes to a major release, the name, the subject, publishing house doesn't get much more major than this one, but needless to say, I am more skeptical than I've ever been with this author at any point in his career. This is Walter Isaacson's new book, a biography of Elon Musk. Very much designed, the cover is very much designed to look like, to call up the cover of Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs, which was a huge surprise in a positive way. It was a brilliant biography. Everybody loved it. No one was expecting to. And this is clearly meant to evoke that. There's no comparison. There might be if Jobs had lived and embarrassed himself, but there isn't any comparison now post-Twitter. This book was researched, written, vetted, brought to its publishers, put in its final position, I am sure, before Elon Musk bought Twitter and changed it. So there might be an afterword here, hastily penned and added onto the book, but this was not written in light of that at all. And yet that changes everything. This is now an evil figure. You look at that face and you no longer think, oh, he's kind of wacky, but he's innovating with space tech and other things. True, he's tortured all sorts of animals to authorize the torture of all sorts of animals. And true, he's lied about his past. And true, that past looks a little dodgy. But he does seem like an interesting person. But then he bought Twitter on a whim one morning, using a 420 joke for his opening price, tanked it as a company, and flooded it with racist and Nazi propaganda. It's flooded it with that. And openly said that was his business plan. That wasn't just a bug of what he actually did. That was his business plan. I'm going to take over. I'm going to buy Twitter, one of the foremost social media discussion forums in the Western world. I'm going to buy it, and I'm going to buy it specifically so you can say the N-word. I'm going to do it specifically for that. I know a lot of you really want to, and you can under these oppressive old rules. So I'm going to make it so that you can issue slurs of all kinds. The floodgates have been relatively tamped down on potentially deadly misinformation. I'm going to open those floodgates. I want you to lie to anybody that you can. And I'm going to lie. I'm going to be on Twitter a lot, favoring, retweeting, and also actively promulgating all sorts of completely damaging conspiracy theories like a lunatic. Even though I have a responsibility to do better than that. I have a responsibility not to do that. A moral responsibility, ethical responsibility to the society I live in. No, doesn't matter. So this book was written about an Elon Musk who was not yet an unambiguously evil figure. And you got to pity the biographer who picks a subject like that and then has during the book's composition, or when it's all done, has the subject become unmitigatedly evil. What are you going to do? The book's still going to come out. Millions of dollars are riding on it. So we will see. Now, I'm not. Obviously, this book was written before that, but this book wasn't written before coercion. Steve Jobs was an egomaniac, just like Elon Musk, but he was a different kind of egomaniac. He was the kind of egomaniac who would tell a thoroughgoing biographer, go ahead and examine every single primary document in my life. You'll find that they do vindicate that I am Jesus. Come back to Earth. Elon Musk is the type that says, if you find anything I don't like, the project's over. So it could very well be that this is fan service fellatio anyway, even without the buying of Twitter. So this could very well be a Walter Isaacson book that is not just worthless, but horrible, actively horrible. We will see. I had serious doubts about the Steve Jobs books, and it surprised me. We'll see if this is true with Elon Musk. And then we have, this is by Tobias Rose Stockwell. This is Outrage Machine, How Tech Amplifies Discontent, Disrupts Democracy, and What We Can Do About It. And we have all the angry emojis there, all in a web, because these things are all connected. I read all sorts of stuff like this about social contagion and social media-inspired malaise and whatnot. I find a lot of them overly simplistic, and most of them miss the elephant in the room, which is, I know you're not going to like to hear it, those two horrible words, self-control. Most of them just pretend that they live in a world in which no one has ever even heard of that concept. Just doesn't exist at all. It just doesn't exist at all. Maybe in ye olden days, maybe in Periclean Athens, we read that, oracles perched on temples and that women turned into trees and that men sometimes had a thing they called self-control. But come on, in the modern era, none of those things are true. It's actually not true. You can simply control yourself. But I'm ready for this book to just pretend that such a concept doesn't exist at all. But I'm interested to see what it has to say. I'm interested to see whether or not it's just Chicken Little alarmism, as so many of these things are. Then we have, this is the next Shadow Riders novel from Christine Feehan, Shadow Dance. This is just brainless himbo romance series, but I've read all the others. And I read this, I love this author, so it's pure brain candy. There's nothing really good or challenging. Okay, all right. This next one is a big picture book from Rizzoli. And you're going to see that face again. This is Shark Portraits. Just a big picture book of photography of all kinds of sharks in all kinds of up-close and intimate positions right before they kill their photographers and eat them. This is, I don't know, the question mark that I have about this thing is what kind of text it will have. Will it have much of a text presence at all, or will it mainly just be pretty pictures? We shall see. I'm interested in it anyway. Then we have, this is the new book by David James Duncan, who did The River Wye and The Brothers K. This is Sun House. I have no idea what this is about, a contemporary novel. It might be historical. I don't really need to know what it's about because this author I'm going to read anyway. I'm not saying really that he has high credit in the Bank of Steve because I wasn't particularly fond of either The River Wye or The Brothers K, but they made enough of an impression on me and on the reading world, so I'm definitely going to read anything new by this author. If he comes out with another book, I'm going to read it. Then we have this thing. This is by Quinn Eastman. This is... it's popular science. That's one of my genres, one of the ones that I love. This is going to annoy me. This is The Woman Who Couldn't Wake Up. Hypersomnia and the Science of Sleepiness. And I don't know anything more about the book than that. But I know one thing that's going to be a small problem for this book, a small obstacle for it to overcome. And that is, listen carefully, there's no such thing as hypersomnia. There is no such thing as hypersomnia. There is no such thing as hypersomnia, which is going to be a hard hurdle for this book to clear. There is no such thing as the subject of this book. So the initial fake studies and the initial fake statistics and the initial fake anecdotes are going to be a little bit hard to get through. Okay? Especially, I know this isn't going to go down well because I'd be willing to bet that between 15 and 35% of the people watching this video and listening to me right now are convinced that they have something called hypersomnia. You don't. You're just lazy. That's all. You don't have hypersomnia. You're just lazy. But we will see. We'll see what. I don't imagine that much can be done with this thing, but it might have some interesting bits about the science of sleep. Not the fake science of sleep, not the pseudoscience of sleep. There's no such thing as the subject of the book. But the author might have stumbled accidentally upon genuine sleep science, which would be interesting. Then we have, this is one of those guided picture books like Paperbacks from Hell. I'm going to love this anyway. This is Worlds Beyond Time, sci-fi art of the 1970s. Mostly book covers, I would imagine, and a thrill. It'll be just a thrill for me to go through here. You'll get the usual thing here, fads and trends. You'll get potted biographies of the artist. You'll get the books, the covers of the books. That's the main reason I get these things, is because I get to see the covers of the books. I get to see them as books, and remember having them all at one point or another. I don't know, again, what kind of text presence will be in here, but I'm looking forward to it anyway. And I think that's it for those 3 questions. Just all lumped at the same time. So let's move on here to question. We'll just jump ahead to question number 5, the biggest disappointment. And so far, anyway, that's this: The White Lady by Jacqueline Winspear. This is the start of a new series by the author of the Maisie Dobbs books. And starts of new series can be wobbly anyway. I'm not in any way giving up, but I thought this was kind of bland as the start of a series. For an author who's usually not bland at all, I didn't feel like her heart was in this in the way that it is in the Maisie Dobbs books. Now, that could just be momentum on my part. Like a lot of readers, I could just be so familiar with Maisie Dobbs that anything that's not is something that is going to feel like it's dud on a launch pad. But I don't think so. I think I went into this wanting to like it, and I didn't particularly like it. I didn't dislike it. This is a really competent author, but I didn't particularly like it. So this will count as a disappointment. Unless you count, things like that weird Carrie Lake book or things like that. But I don't count those as disappointments because I'm not expecting to like them. Then prompt number 6 is the biggest surprise. And I have an example for this as well. And it's going to seem a little weird. It's an indie book. It's an indie published novel by Freeman Jace. Excuse me. Called House Made of Sound, with a very typical bad indie cover. There, a guy walking to heaven on the bridge of a guitar. Ugh. And I saw that cover, and I saw what this is about, an aging rock producer and, the rock and roll world, et cetera, et cetera. And also I saw that the author includes a playlist for the reading of his book, which is always the kiss of death. I saw all of that together and thought, all right, well, I know what I'm going to get here. Summer of '63, the best times are behind me. I can wear my hair long, gray ponytail, all that sort of stuff. I read a lot of that kind of crap, and it's all just cowardice. If you think that way about your present life, just donate your organs and kill yourself, because just living whining about how the best days are 20 or 30 or 40, 50 years behind you is just so boring. But this was not that. It looked like that. It had all of those warnings, but this was a genuinely wonderful novel about a washed-up rock producer who once upon a time helped a band rise to superstardom. They were a very exclusive band. They filled auditoriums, but the auditoriums were full of the cognoscenti. They didn't pump out dumb albums. They didn't do anything like. They were serious things. And he fell out with them. This producer fell out with them, largely through his own doing. Even though they'd been his closest brothers, they fell out. And we encounter him, when this book opens, we encounter him years and years later. He's working for a record label's sharkish producer. And that producer has heard a rumor that this band, which is touring, has cut an album without their record label's permission or knowledge, which is against their contract. And that record label CEO wants that album. First of all, he wants to know, is it true? And if it's true and that album exists, he wants that album. He views it as his property. And he sends our main character to that band on tour to find out. Go behind the scenes. You used to know these people. You were responsible for them becoming a megastar success. get behind the scenes and find out the truth of it. And if that album exists, get me the master of it. But when he gets to the bouncer at the front door of their latest venue, the bouncer says, your name's on the list. You're a non-admittance list. You're not allowed in. They don't want anything to do with you. He can't believe it. Yes, we had a falling out, but not even to see me? After all I've done for you? But he's determined. So he hides out in a music case of a big instrument on board their plane. And the plane has engine trouble, and he's being knocked all around. He thinks, this is really bad. This is not normal turbulence. And when he opens, and we finally gets out of the case, he sees a gigantic opening in the side of the plane. The plane has been mortally wounded, and it crashes. And everything goes black, and then goes white. And our main hero wakes up, and he's in some sort of weird afterlife. So the cover is accurate to that extent. And the celestial figure that is talking to him is saying, he's wondering, is this heaven? And the celestial figure is saying, well, no, not exactly. No, because you're not actually dead. Your body is still clinging to life back in the world. Everyone else on the plane is as dead as disco, as the person says, but you're not. Your body is still alive. So I'm afraid you can't go any further than here. You can't wander around in the afterlife. You can't, for instance, see your old bandmates. So once again, this guy's on a non-admittance list. Once again, he's being told, I'm sorry, you can't go any further than this. And he very much wants to meet those band members, even though he knows they're dead now, because they're the only ones who know where that album is. And he's still sticking to his mission to find out, does that album exist and where is it? So he has to figure out a way, with the help of a perky psychic that he meets in the beginning of the book, has to figure out a way to get around the rules here and figure out how to talk to these people. And that part is raucous and rambunctious, but there's also a very feeling moment. There's a very feeling thread running throughout this book, because apart from all the weirdness of it all, he realizes that his old friends are dead. That this mythical album or not, there's not going to be any more albums from these people. This is a tragedy. And that hits you, and I wasn't expecting it to. The writing hit me, and I wasn't expecting it to. And the conclusion is so heartfelt. I always complain on this channel that writers don't know how to end books. Maybe I should start amending that to say mainstream overpaid writers don't know how to end books. But this guy does. Freeman Jays does. This was terrific. A total surprise to me. Yeah. I read one of these things every day. I wasn't expecting to like this at all, much less like it as much as I did. Then the next one, number 7, is favorite new author, a debut. For now, that's this, Close to Home by Michael McGee. Story of a poor as dirt group of disaffected young men in working class Dublin, and what they do with their lives, what they don't do with their lives. There's really not much of a plot to this thing. I imagine it's the author's autobiography, pretty much to a T. That's usually one of the diagnostics of something being autofiction is that there isn't any plot. But I still liked it. I still thought it was just beautifully, heart-wrenchingly done. So it'll work, definitely, for this prompt. Number 8 is your newest fictional crush. We'll move right on with an embarrassed sigh. To number 9, newest favorite character. I actually have one of those. Another rock and roll thing. I'm a big fan of rock and roll fiction, but this is a book by Daniel Weissman. We talked about it on this channel. This is The Last Songbird. And this is about a washed-up guy who is dreaming of being a songwriter, but he's making ends meet by being just an Uber driver. And he's taken recently to being the favorite repeated call of an older woman named Annie Linden, who is kind of a stand-in for every Pat Benatar, Annie Lennox, 1980s, 1970s rock and roll songbird that you can think of. She's sort of an amalgamation of all of those. She's seen everything, she's done everything, and she likes to talk to this guy. She just likes to unwind and talk with him as they ride aimlessly up the Pacific Coast Highway and back. She doesn't have a destination in mind. She just wants to talk. They resonate with each other. And this book opens with her death. It opens with her body being found or maybe missing, and our main characters, of course, ends up being one of the main suspects. And once the worst is confirmed, the reason that she's my favorite character of this type, even though she's dead when the book opens, is that we learn more and more about her as the book goes on. To the point where this is a weird fictional example of the fact that I learned about the death of a character 300 pages before I mourned the character. I didn't know anything about the character who's gone missing and then turns up dead at the beginning of the book. By the end of the book, I was touched. I was really touched. So very, very well done job. Again, a total surprise to me. Not the kind of book I tend to like. Then let's see here. Number 10 is a book that made you cry. The saddest book you have read. Books don't make me cry, so we'll move on. Number 11, books that made you happy. Now, I have an odd answer for this one. But it's true. This made me happy, even though it isn't a feel-good book. Just the opposite. And it wasn't trying to make me happy. It made me happy because it did what I love books to do. It made me uncomfortable. It unsettled all sorts of preoccupations. It made me think and re-examine. And it has stuck with me, poking at me in my mind the whole time since I read it. And it's this. It's Paco Calvo, translated by Natalie Lawrence. This is Planta Sapiens, a book about plant intelligence. Whether or not plants can think, conceive, feel, mourn, anticipate, enjoy themselves, know each other. It's impossible to concentrate with you there. Come down here. Come on, come down here. All right, we'll stand there if you want. It's not quite the same thing as Schnauzer Sapiens, is it now? Oh. How's the baby? Oh. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, right, yeah. This sort of thing, this kind of book genuinely makes me happy. Baby, come down here. Come on, come down. Oh, there you go. For all of those reasons. So this is not, a feel-good book at all, but that's the sort of thing that does it for me with books. Number 12 is favorite book to film adaptation that you've seen so far this year. That also has been a fairly thin field. Probably the one that I liked the most was The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which is not really a book to film adaptation. Not really. It's about the ship that Dracula uses to come to England, the Demeter. In Dracula, it is a ship that is a ghost ship. It comes to dock with dead people on board, captain lashed to the wheel, with boxes of earth from Transylvania in the hold. And the captain's diary and whatnot. We learn that the crew quickly realizes they have something weird and supernatural on board, and it is steadily killing them all. And this movie, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, gives us that. It gives us that story. And there were, I don't know, is it a literary adaptation? There are plenty that I'm looking forward to at the end of this year, but it's an adaptation of part of a literary work, and they were an elaboration on it. It mostly disappointed me. Mostly. The Dracula, in the version of Dracula in the movie, I think was the most disappointing thing of all. But even the rest of it, there were effective bits, but it doesn't have a crowded field to win out on. So I'll say The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Then number 13 is favorite review that you've written this year. I've written a lot of reviews this year. I've enjoyed them all. So I don't have a favorite. Couldn't pick amongst my children. And then the last one, because we're skipping 15, is number 14. Most beautiful book you've bought so far this year. I don't buy books like this. My new releases come from publishers. But one of them was a big, oversized new book from Thames and Hudson about Vermeer, the aforementioned Vermeer. That was lovely. I don't think I have a picture of it on this device, but it was big and lovely. I mean, a Vermeer book is going to be anyway. So I'm gonna include that one. There are a couple of that are coming that might supplant that, but for now, we'll say that. So there you go. Lumping in those other questions about anticipated new releases, that is the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag for 2023. I think I was tagged in this by Randy Ray, the literate Texan. Doesn't yet know that I am an outcast, a leper, a pariah. But I tag everybody. Everybody should do this anyway. You shouldn't need tagging. This is an annual checkup. I'd love to know how the shape of your reading year is going so far. Feel free to tell me in great detail. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, Booktube.